Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching World Report on News 6 World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump has imposed Ukraine-related sanctions on Russian oil giants Lukoil and Rosneft, targeting companies that fund the Kremlin's war machine. The US Treasury Department says further action is possible, calling for a ceasefire in Ukraine. The European Union's 19th sanctions package against Russia will target 4 Chinese companies, including 2 oil refineries and a trading firm, in what officials call the most economically significant action against China so far. Beijing has denied any wrongdoing as the EU moves to adopt the new sanctions this week. Russian forces have shot down 139 Ukrainian drones overnight, while President Zelensky reports 6 deaths and dozens of injuries from Russian strikes targeting Ukrainian cities and energy infrastructure. He urges allies for stronger sanctions and weapon supplies. Israeli lawmakers have the advancement of West Bank annexation bills as global pressure mounts for Israel to comply with the ICJ ruling on Palestinian rights. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has urged Israel to abide by the court's decision, while UN rights expert Francesca Albanese has condemned the US-brokered ceasefire plan as inadequate to stop what she called a genocide. US President Donald Trump has said he expects to reach a trade deal with Chinese President Xi Jinping during their meeting next week in South Korea. Trump has also planned to discuss China's purchase of Russian oil and possibly restart US soybean exports. He has also mentioned that a deal on nuclear arms could be on the table. China has overtaken the United States as Germany's top trading partner, even as German exports to China fell 13.5% and imports rose 8.5%, while US tariffs cut German exports by 7.5%. Berlin now faces growing concerns over shifting global trade dynamics amid escalating economic and security tensions between Beijing, Washington, and Europe. Syrian authorities have arrested a former military officer accused of executing detainees at the notorious Saydnaya prison during the rule of ousted leader Bashar al-Assad. The prison, long symbol of Assad's brutal repression, which has been linked to thousands of torture and execution cases. China has announced it will celebrate the 80th anniversary of Taiwan's retrocession to Chinese rule this Saturday at Beijing's Great Hall of the People, marking the island's 1945 return from Japanese colonial rule. According to them, however, Taiwan has banned officials from attending, accusing Beijing of distorting history for political purposes. Now we start with US and Russia. US President Donald Trump has imposed sanctions on 2 largest Russian oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft, in response to Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. The sanctions target the companies that fund Russia's military operations. Following the sanctions, the US Treasury Department has also expressed a willingness to take further measures, urging Moscow to immediately agree to a ceasefire and halt battle line assaults. Additionally, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has called on U.S. allies to join the sanctions and enforce them. Let's listen in to what he has said at the White House when asked about these sanctions.
We are going to either announce after the close this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning a substantial pickup in Russia's sanctions.
This development marks a shift in President Trump's policy, as he had previously avoided sanctioning Russia over the war, choosing instead to rely on trade measures. Trump's sanctions on Russia's oil companies Lukoil and Rosneft follow a similar move by the UK government, which sanctioned both companies last week. Now for this discussion, we welcomed retired Major General Sudhakarji. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you, Major General, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, again and again, we have talked about this, but how effective will this measure be, according to you, to push Russia to end the war?
Shobha, good morning. Thank you for inviting me for your morning show, and must compliment you for a relevant question.
Thank you.
The same issue has come up time and again. If you take your mind back between 2014 till 24th February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, total number of sanctions imposed on Russia was 2,000 plus. To be precise, it was around 2,623 were sanctions. Now, from 24th February 2022 till date, the number of sanctions on Russia have gone up to around 23,000. Some put together, they are touching a figure of 26,000 to 27,000 sanctions. Has any impact been felt? Has anybody been able to stop the war? If the primary aim is to stop the war, this mindless conflict, sanctions will have no bearing. Now look at the economy of Russia. Russia is posting a rate of growth higher than that of any country in the Europe and the USA, any leading economy. Look at the inflation rate. Look at the trade it is doing. So everything is actually going absolutely tickety-boo as far as Russia is concerned. And the conflict goes on merrily. It doesn't stop, doesn't show any signs of coming to a stoppage. So therefore, I would say that the Western powers or the alliances should do well if they go into the details, rather than flip-flopping. At times they are imposing sanctions, at times quietly they pull back the sanctions imposed. There is a case in point. In 2016, they had imposed a sanction on the aluminum factories of Russia. And soon they realized that the automobile industry in the leading economies were coming to a grinding halt. So they quietly, without making any noise, they lifted the embargo. So it has got no meaning. Therefore, all I would urge and suggest to the global powers who are involved in this particular issue is that let them think it over. If they don't have any time to apply themselves, let there be a core group. If United Nations cannot be trusted, let them form a core specialized group, pick up people from all relevant countries, make them a group, let them be the kind of an advisory role to Donald Trump and the people who are involved, France, Germany, etc., etc. Back to you, Asum.
And yes, building on that, Major General, talking about these coalitions, this week we saw we see that in Europe a lot of talks are going on between these leaders for continuous support of Ukraine towards in this war. So how do you think that the coalition of the willing, that coalition or EU, and them thinking about putting more sanctions on Russia, how will this affect? Do you think they have come to any advancement or any feasible action for them to end the war?
For lack of correct expression, I would put it under the heading of paradox of reality. You see, this is what the paradox is. The ground situation demands something. If they actually intend to stop this war, then it requires identifying the problem correctly. Not the between the disease and the symptom, they have to narrow down to the problem, the disease. What is the disease? The disease is not the economy of Russia. Disease is actually related to the security apparatus or architecture which should come into existence between Europe and Russia. That they have not catered for. They dissolved the Warsaw Pact immediately after disintegration of the USSR in 1991. But how come the NATO kept on expanding? Because there is a hidden agenda of NATO which nobody talks, no media is talking because it has not reached the public domain. And that hidden agenda is under the heading of the unilateral or the unitary power of the world. that is called the unipolar world. The unipolar world has got the objective from East Germany to Vladivostok. They have to expand their sphere of influence. This nobody is talking, and if I give this statement, then people will laugh at me. This is what the hidden agenda is, and sooner or later you will come to be convinced about what I am saying. This conflict will not end, it will continue, and sooner or later the situation will be so created that Russia will willy-nilly form part of the NATO, and NATO's sphere of influence will expand to include Vladivostok in the northeastern portion of Russia. That is the stretch. This is one way of isolating China, and this side, Afghanistan is going to be taken care of in the Middle East, and so as the East Asia and the Southeast Asia, if America has got some plan to actually put into some effect and action. If they don't have any plan, then Donald Trump's tenure will just fly past like this without realizing. 3.5 years is not a very long time. The new man will come, new leadership will come. He will understand as per his perspective. The deep state will have a last laugh and a field day in taking every president of USA, holding them to ransom. Look at what is happening in USA. 7 million people on the street. They are actually protesting against the Donald Trump style of leadership. They are saying the king is not required. They require somebody human who can connect with the people and meet the aspiration of the people. So this has never happened in the US. So gradually the deep state is actually making subtle and invisible effort to calibrate and coerce Donald Trump, bringing onto the lap and the sphere of their domain, so that Donald Trump does that thing which the deep state in America is desiring, or the deep state in Europe is desiring. This is what exactly going to happen. Back to Asun.
And Major General, that is so insightful. Thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to ask your opinion about, what do you think about Ukrainian President Zelensky? What's your insight? Or why do you think he's holding on to power like this? And his take is that the war is still going. It's not about, we can't have election right now. What's your take?
My take is that he has finished officially and legally. He has completed his mandate, and he should rightfully conduct the elections in Ukraine. He is not conducting elections. He is trying to erode the sanctity of the judiciary, because he himself is involved in many corruption cases. There is a fear in the mind that he may be put behind bars. He may go into the jail if he is tried by the court. So therefore, on one hand, there is no legal sanctity of the president, and the situation demands that there should be a proper leader. Now, who that leader is under the circumstances? Is there anybody better than Zelensky? Has anybody shown up his head and shown his capability of leadership under this wartime type of situation? None. There is nobody. There is an old saying that a known devil is better than unknown in jail. So the known devil is Zelensky. At least he is doing something, running around trying to save the country from disaster, regardless of the consequences. At least this man is actually up and about. So therefore, my take on the whole issue is that his sanctity doesn't exist. Even if there is an agreement between Russia and Ukraine, who is going to sign it? Perhaps the Speaker of the Parliament. They have a parliament. The Speaker is the next. This is the man coming to my mind. He's got the next authority, because they don't have a concept of vice president. I don't see anybody coming onto the limelight. So who is that person going to sign the document which will be legally accepted for ratification? Because land captured by Russia has to be given up back to the Russia. And if land of the country, much against the sovereignty and the national interest of Ukraine, if it is going to be parted with, then nothing less than the parliament's ratification and validation is required. For that, Zelensky doesn't have any authority. For that, the people's mandate has to be taken in the parliament. If parliament says yes to achieve peace, then they go ahead. If they say no, then there is never going to be a yes. So at the moment, to sum up my response to your question, Zelensky has got no legal sanctity, no legal authority. His signing any document anywhere will have no meaning. You need to have the elections at the earliest, much at the cost of his own standing And last point is there has to be a leader to make any meaningful discount or concessions or negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Back to you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Major General Sudhakarji, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. In recent comments, President Donald Trump has revealed that his conversations with Russian President Vladimir Putin on ending the Russia-Ukraine war have been productive, but ultimately don't go anywhere. Let's listen into what he has said.
Well, I think that in terms of honesty, the only thing I can say is every time I speak with Vladimir, I have good conversations, and then they don't go anywhere. They just don't go anywhere. So in that sense, but no, look, he's fighting a war. He's in a war. That's two very competent sides, and that's the way war is. You never know with war, but I would say that it's time to make a deal.
Trump has also expressed hope that the tremendous sanctions imposed on Russia, particularly targeting its two largest oil companies, would be temporary. Let's listen in.
Question today is a very big day in terms of what we're doing. Look, these are tremendous sanctions. These are very big. Those are against their two big oil companies, and we hope that they won't be on for long. We hope that the war will be settled.
Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Scott Bessent has confirmed the sanctions, attributing them to Putin's refusal to end this senseless war. The U.S. has taken a firm stance aiming to cut off financial support to the Kremlin's military actions as the conflict continues. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that the United States still wants to meet with Russia. This comes after President Donald Trump canceled his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Budapest. Rubio has made the comments at Joint Base Andrews following new U.S. sanctions on Russian oil companies. Let's listen into what Marco Rubio has said.
Well, we'd still like to meet with the Russians. We'd still want to, and I think I had a good call with Foreign Minister Lavrov, and we'll follow up on that. We're always going to be interested in engaging if there's an opportunity to achieve peace. I think the president has said repeatedly for a number of months now that at some point he will have to do something if we don't make progress on the peace deal. Today was the day he decided to do something.
The European Union has approved a 19th package of sanctions against Russia in response to its ongoing war in Ukraine. This package includes a ban on imports of Russian liquefied natural gas, which is a move aimed at further reducing the EU's reliance on Russian energy. Now, the LNG ban will be implemented in two stages. Short-term contracts will end after 6 months, while long-term contracts will be phased out by January 1st, 2027. In addition to the LNG ban, the new sanctions package also includes travel restrictions for Russian diplomats and adds 117 vessels from Russia's shadow fleet, mainly tankers, to a list that now totals 558. Moreover, the sanctions target banks in Kazakhstan and Belarus. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff has welcomed the sanctions package and stated that many of Kyiv's proposals had also been incorporated into it. Now we stay on this topic. Russian defense forces have claimed to have shot down 139 Ukrainian drones overnight, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has reported 6 deaths and at least 17 injuries after Russian strikes targeted cities and energy infrastructure across Ukraine. Zelensky also said the residential buildings were hit, with fires breaking out in Zaporizhia and damage reported in Kyiv. The attacks impacted several regions, including Kyiv, Odessa, and Dnipro. Ukraine's air defense forces and drone interceptors were actively responding. President Zelensky has accused Russia of ignoring diplomacy and called for stronger sanctions and more military aid from international allies. Now we go back to our guest discussion with retired Major General Sudhakarji. He joins us as an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for staying with us. Major General, now looking back, we saw statements from President Trump. He was calling this a previous or latest calls or his talks with Russia as productive, but without reaching any deal or any ceasefire agreement, nor plans of meetings. So what do you think productive means over there?
Shobha, thank you for asking a question. I can't help but laughing because now it has become such a routine, predictable question in all the channels, is that it's more or less like a parody. See, it's a comedy. Each one is turning out to a big comedian, including Donald Trump. He also doesn't know what he's speaking. And perhaps he is closing his eyes to his own people on the streets. 7 million people on the streets of America and 2,700 cities. It speaks volumes about his policy and his mindset. So, coming back straight to the question that you were saying, what productive end? The taste of pudding lies in eating. In the instant case, the cherry on the icing is actually stopping the damn war. And he himself has been saying that within 24 hours of his assumption of presidency, he would bring the mindless conflict to an end. Has he done anything? Has he gone anywhere closer? Alaska visit was, Putin actually had a field day in turning things as per his terms. He just came and he explained the history or geography something to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump was absolutely zapped. He didn't know which side to go because that is where the actual problem is. The Americans are not keen to stop the war. When I say Americans, I'm sorry, I'm using this for lack of correct expression. It is the deep state. Donald Trump, no matter how noble his intention and objective would have been during the election campaigning, post assumption of his appointment as a President 2.0, he has unfortunately been hijacked by the deep state. He started talking the language of the deep state. He's no longer talking like Donald Trump. That's what I keep saying in many channels, including your channel. No president of USA till date has ever been original and been able to implement his vision and his conviction as per his thought process, the way he actually did campaigning in the elections and came into the power with some noble objective. No precedent. It has been hijacked a number of times or several times or a million times by the deep state, and that is what exactly happening. There is no productive dialogue that can ever take place. The only way to make meaningful, substantive, productive dialogue is stop the damn war as is where is basis. Stop firing. No firing from any gun. Freeze. Number two, pull them back by 5 to 10 kilometers. Number three, have a neutral force. And that neutral force should be given that this is the point or alignment along which, call it as line of control or line of actual control, 5 kilometers onto either side, neither of the forces will come closer. Keep a surveillance team on the eyes, keep an eye on both those stakeholders and make sure that they are not breached. If they are breached, then this neutral force has to be put under the United Nations banner, given adequate chapter 7, that is, they have to enforce law and order, peace and harmony. If push comes to shove, and if kinetic means have to be applied, they should be allowed to do that in order to maintain law and order and some kind of tranquility and peace along the border. This is the only way to stop the war. If you dilly-dally, at times you say you are giving Tomahawk missile, the second day you are saying you are imposing sanction, third day you decide that, oh, that sanction is going to have a detrimental impact in our defense industry, you please quietly just remove it. This is no way of bringing, some sense into the geopolitics and this mindless conflict. I think this drama should stop. The Europeans should do well if they sit down seriously and find a practical and pragmatic solution to go ahead in this particular issue. Back to you, Asu.
Yes, indeed. Major General, thank you very much for sharing that insight and staying with us throughout this whole topic. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. We move on to U.S. The U.S. Department of War officials have confirmed a recent military strike on a suspected drug smuggling vessel in the Pacific Ocean. According to Pentagon officials, the strike was carried out as part of a broader counter-narcotics campaign targeting illicit trafficking routes near South America. The attack marks the latest in a series of operations aimed at disrupting drug trade activities, which have largely focused on the Caribbean in recent weeks. This strike is now the 8th known operation in the region. U.S. officials have confirmed that the vessel was involved in smuggling narcotics. The attack resulted in the death of 5 alleged smugglers. Meanwhile, the Trump administration continues to defend its strategy despite growing concerns from international leaders regarding the legality and potential risks of such actions. Now, for this discussion, we welcome our guest, Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Shruti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Shruti, and now looking at these 8 attacks or counter actions by U.S. on Caribbean, how far can this keep going? And when U.S. says that this is legitimate, or they have the proofs, but do we know of any proofs that U.S. has publicized?
Greetings, Asuma. Thank you so much for inviting me. From what I understand, the UN report does not designate Venezuela as the primary source or even a large transit corridor for drugs for USA. So any proof the Donald Trump regime has of being a narco-terror hub under the aegis of Maduro in Venezuela seems kind of politically motivated, because there is no proof from a neutral agency that backs up their statements. They are sinking vessels, killing sailors, without actually trying to show the world why. If they have the ability to sink a vessel, I'm sure they also have the ability to capture it with all its good, or at least some semblance of evidence that can prove to the world that this is not just USA trying to flex its muscles in the Caribbean Sea. The major part of drug problem that the USA unfortunately faces comes from Mexico and Colombia, and that goes through the land route. Some of it comes through the Pacific route also, but almost none of it, none would be a very strong word, but a very small margin of it probably comes through the Caribbean. If Venezuela is a transit corridor, then those drugs are never aimed at USA. Those drugs are aimed towards the European continent and UK. So from what we understand as the World Geopolitical Analysts Group, the UN reports are very, very clear about how this is. Maduro, on the other hand, in 2025, according to a UN report, has seized the anti-narcotics agents there have seized about 52 tons, grounded 400 narco transit-linked aircrafts in Venezuela. So he's trying to control whatever nexus that is there, that is using Venezuela as a zone of transiting drugs. But instead of appreciating any of these efforts, US is sinking ships without public proof. Just take my word for it, is no longer applicable in the new world of multipolar geopolitics. We cannot just say, just because I'm USA, you need to listen to me. Provide the proof for your actions, or you are just as bad as the people who bomb nations just because they want access to the resources. And this is exactly what the world is witnessing in the case of USA versus Venezuela.
And Shruti, like building on that, Maduro is trying, and you've mentioned all the facts over here, and US instead of appreciating is sinking ships. So what's US's agenda here? So what's their final goal over here? Why are they continuing to do this towards Venezuela, even Colombia?
I completely understand where this question is coming from. So let's take a few sections of events that are happening across the world. One, the Nobel Peace Prize is given to a lady from Venezuela who is openly against Maduro. She gave public interviews after her victory as a Nobel Peace Prize winner was declared. She gave public interviews where she said she will provide privatization of the oil reserves that are in the hands of Venezuela, which is, I believe, the largest oil reserves in the world, more than 300 billion barrels of it, even more than Saudi Arabia. So this is one of the things that should trigger a question in somebody's mind. The second part is that, of course, the Maduro regime is accused of being very non-transparent of their elections. In the 2024 elections, the UN themselves had said, please do not destroy the voting records, but they have not had, but Maduro regime did not provide proof of his victory. So there is a question on whether Maduro is actually a democratically represented leader of the nation. So that particular segment is also there. Then we look at what Donald Trump and his regime is saying. They've labeled Maduro a narco-terrorist. They have openly supported, J.D. Vance included, the lady who wants to be the new face. I believe her name is Maria, who's the Nobel Peace Prize winner for 2025. So they are openly supporting that lady as a political figurehead of and they have openly said that there will be CIA operations in Venezuela. Now they've left that question open, whether it's the CIA operations are for regime change or drug control, nobody knows. But CIA is notorious for having a rule book on how to change regimes so that USA can get access to resources of a particular nation. If we stitch all of this up, we see that the nationalization projects under Maduro is not something that USA is very happy with. Then we see that a large amount of oil reserves rests under a nation which is not completely submissive to USA. Then we see a person who is anti-Maduro being celebrated in the Western world. So all of this stitched together a narrative for anybody to understand that USA is trying to dominate a large amount of resources of Venezuela, and they find Maduro as a stumbling block, and they will try everything to brand him a criminal, to ensure that the regime change happens, and the USA benefits from all the resources that the nation has to offer. On the other side of the coin, US does have a large amount of drug problem. The drugs come from across the borders from Mexico and Colombia. They are trying to fight that, but not as aggressively as I see them fighting in the Caribbean Sea with Venezuela. Why Venezuela is a question which comes from, the answer for which comes through stitching up all the different parts of the conversation that we see happening around on Venezuela. So this is something that should be projected, that although Venezuela might have its problems, sinking ships is not the answer. Provide proof and then have a neutral party take action rather than becoming the king of the world and deciding who gets to live and who gets to die.
Yes, Shruti, thank you always for joining us, and you amaze me with your answer, with connecting all the dots over here. That was Shruti Das Gupta, International Affairs expert, joined us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. Britain has sanctions Balkan-based criminal gangs involved in forged documents and human trafficking, as well as those financing illegal migration. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called it a vile trade and said the gangs must be taken down through strong international cooperation. The summit in London with Western Balkan leaders will also focus on reducing illegal migration, countering Russian influence, and other shared threats. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has urged progress in Serbia-Kosovo relations, which remain a sensitive issue for the region. This is what Keir Starmer has said.
The Western Balkans has long been a vital transit route for the criminal smuggling gangs. You don't want to see those gangs operating in your territory, and we all suffer the consequences of their action. We're talking of a criminal enterprise here, a vile trade with people making huge amounts of money that directly impacts on all of us. So we have to take these gangs down, smash them, through proper, purposeful cooperation.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.